Hello everyone and welcome back to another video. In this video I'm just updating my YouTube avatar and my avatar for anything basically. But before we get started, I'm just pausing it to put a little disclaimer that this one did have to be sped up so much and there's a lot of zooming in and out, so I feel like it moves a little bit quickly. So I just wanted to give that warning there. Also, this video took me, well, this drawing took me about 15 hours. Which isn't that long, but it is the longest drawing I think I've done so far. So I already did the liner off screen and everything and all the sketching as well. But I kind of wanted this YouTube avatar or avatar to kind of look like me and represent me. So I just kind of found this picture and thought it looked good. So then I just started drawing it. To begin with, especially when I start drawing and everything, or coloring I guess I should say, is I just lay down flat colors in each section just so I know where to map those colors out, and then I will shade and all that later on. And also, if you notice that I changed the background color to be a green, this way I could tell where, you know, the line art ends and everything, and if there's any white spaces that I left out. And also for the eyes, even though they are white, I still like to paint in the white, just because if I were to decide to print this off, the paper might not be quite as white as I would want it. One other thing is this video, some of it I streamed on Twitch. So if there's any like black screens, or sometimes there will be like a be right back sign, that is just because I was streaming. And yeah. In this drawing, I also try to do my shading a little different. So usually I'll just take, you know, a light color or a base color and then a shadow color, and I will use the airbrush tool, and I will have the hardness set to 0. That way it gets that fuzzy edge, and then I'll set the spacing a little bit bigger, farther apart, so that again you get that fuzzier edge, so it's kind of more airbrush look. And I would just take the shadow color and do where the shadows are, and then go back in with a lighter opacity brush, and I would, you know, feather it out. But in this one, I actually tried to use the color picker tool to pick the different tones in between the shadows, so that it would look more gradiated than just, you know, 2 colors. And also for the eyes, I wanted to try to make them look a little realistic. But in the end I didn't succeed that well, because if you notice in irises, there's kind of like, you know, some have lines of different color going from the outer edge to the pupil area. So I tried doing that, but it didn't look quite as good as I wanted it, so I just went back and just kind of kept shading until I got it to where I wanted it. In this video, I also tried using the smudge tool / blur tool as well, but I didn't have the settings correctly. So if you notice in the eye, I used it around the edge, and it kind of pulled the white from the outside of the eye into the iris of the eye. So I just kind of, you know, reshaded everything when that happened. You say those things, then shut me out. And I know this drawing looks a little weird right now because I don't have eyebrows drawn in, but for the eyebrows I didn't want to make like aligned eyebrows, so that's why I don't actually have lines for the eyebrows. And also on the nose, if you notice, I put a little pink and a little bit of an orangey color, just kind of to make it look a little bit more like skin instead of just having like a shadow tone or a bright spot on the nose. And here's where I'm starting on the eyebrows. So to do the eyebrows, I just used my sketch layer, and I took a really small brush and took the color I wanted the eyebrows to be, and kind of just, you know, did individual strokes until I got it to where I wanted it to be. And I also erased some of the outside edge, so it wasn't quite as, you know, you could see the individual strokes. And then I also took a lighter color or the skin color in some parts, where I just used an even tinier brush and kind of went towards the eyebrow, just to get it a little bit more natural looking and like hair. And then I also selected that color using the, I believe it was the color range selection, and I just used a light brown to kind of make some highlights and highlight it a little bit. And I also decided to add a little scar or slit in the eyebrow. I don't actually have one, but I just think it looks cool, and especially in this drawing. So for that, I just, you know, used the skin tone color, put a mark in the eyebrow, and then just shaded it. I find it hard to commit, but you don't even try. Still I'm better with than without you. Oh, I'm on it, I want it, but why do you seem to call in your eyes? I can't tell if you're here or you're out there. Do you wanna be out there? You don't need to be Prince Charming to me. I just need this to be real. I don't need no fairy tale. You don't need a killer pregnant for me. Ooh, I don't need no fairy tale. And here I'm trying to do that natural looking eye, and I just decided that it didn't work out, so I just kind of left that idea and did regular shading in the eye. And then here in a little bit there's going to be a jump in some footage where I finish the eye, where I add like the little catch light and some, you know, some light to it basically. So to do that, I just created a new layer, and then I put a effect on it. I think it was outer glow, and I used the brush tool to put a white spot wherever I wanted the catch lights to be, and I used the outer glow and set it to kind of a greenish color, so that it kind of looked more like wet and more alive kind of. And I also put some catch lights in the whites of the eye just to make it look wet. And another thing I would suggest, especially for me, is that when I'm doing shading, you notice how I'm so zoomed into this one area, like for example, this eyebrow, and I'm shading under it. I would suggest kind of zooming out so you have a bigger picture, so you don't render this one specific area and it looks really good zoomed in, but then when you zoom out, it just doesn't match the rest of the picture. So if you're zoomed out, I feel like it's easier to, you know, render or shade the area so that it makes a overall piece look better, and so that it doesn't look, you know, like you just were so zoomed in here. Everything falls into place. The minute you leave and give me space. And a thing for this drawing that I want to mention is that this took me about 2 years to complete, not because I worked on it for 2 years consistently, but just because in between those 2 years, you know, there was a patch of time where I just didn't have any motivation to draw. It happens sometimes. Like I'll just open it, want to do some of it, and then I just will just quit because I don't have the motivation. So, you know, if that ever happens to you, it's all right. Because you can always come back to it, and you may learn that you've improved or drawn differently. Because especially when I reopened this, I realized that some of it, like the shading and everything, I didn't even shade that way anymore. So I just went back and, you know, fixed everything. So originally I started this drawing in April 2018, and then I actually just finished it in March 2020. So, you know, it took a while. I also have a full-time job, so I was working a lot of the time, and I hardly have time to draw anymore, but just kind of in my free time, whenever I have some free time, I like to just come back to things and try finishing them. And there's the cut in the footage where I add the light to the eyes. And here I'm just adding some pink on the inner corner of the eyes and adding some catch lights to those as well. Just to make it look a little bit more realistic. This picture in no means is photorealistic, but I do think for me it's one of the most realistic drawings I've done so far. And one other thing I want to mention, so like earlier I said that this took me a while to complete. When I came back and opened this drawing up, I realized that if it was me, I wouldn't probably wear the clothes that this drawing has so far. So even though I put in the effort to shade some of the clothes, later on I will actually delete it all and redraw it. And also, if you notice later on in a little bit, I accidentally shade on the line art layer instead of the actual color layer. This happens to me almost like every drawing I do. So to fix it, basically what I do is I just select on the line art layer the shading I did, including the line art around it, and I will just copy it and then paste it onto the color layer and redo the line art for that one section.
Dried out tears of sorrow, lacking all emotion, staring down the barrel, waiting for the final gates to open to a new tomorrow, moving with the motion.
So I believe this is where I'm going to start changing up the clothes. So basically I just take the sketch layer and line art layer and delete the clothes section. Before I did any of this, I made a copy of the line art and the color layer in case I wanted to go back. And also I put up a picture of myself. I took some reference photos just so I could know what like it looks like for my hoodie and the pose that I'm in.
You think I would look pretty on your arm once you cover up my bruises and battle scars, but it always ends the same.
And here I'm just editing the photos to get more contrast.
Can't bear the things I've had to face. Got you crying on your knees in pain. Oh, some things never.
And one thing I like about digital drawing is I noticed that when I drew the hoodie, the hood section, it wasn't quite proportionally correct to my head. So what I did was I just selected it around using the lasso tool and I enlarged it. And here I'm trying to do my mouth, and I struggled with it and it's not quite how I want it, but I ended up finding something that looked alright that I could use for this drawing. And kind of just going through like how I do my coloring and shading. So basically I'll do the line art and then I'll use the magic wand tool to select the specific area that I'm gonna color. So like if I do the face or anything skin, I will select that all using the magic wand tool. And then I will use Alt Select Enlarge, I think. Or no, it's Modify and then Enlarge. This will enlarge the selected area, and I usually do it by about 2 pixels. This way, when you color, it goes into the line art so that it's not like a harsh line in between the line art and the color. So if you were to need to do the background or wanted to do something without a line art, you could eventually erase the line art and there wouldn't be like a big gap in between. And if you notice also, I changed my earrings and I also got a nose ring in between the time of making this, so I added that as well. And for the nose ring, I kind of just did a circle and then I used it was either warp or skew selection, and that way I could, you know, kind of modify the perspective of that nose ring so that it looked more like it was on the face. And here I'm just doing the line art for the new sketch that I have done. Now I'm just going to delete the color that I have already for the clothes and then start laying down flat colors for the other color for the clothes that I'm putting on now. And for the face, at least most of it was already done, so I didn't have to reshade the whole face and everything. And here in a little bit, I'm also going to duplicate the line art again so that I can change the color of the line art. I change it to like a kind of reddish color. That way for the hoodie that's black, it's easier for me to see where the lines are and where I need to add that shading and highlighting. So here I'm just going in to finish shading the face and neck. I use the same technique I mentioned earlier where I use the color picker tool to select the in-between colors so it makes it more gradient instead of just using 2 flat colors. And I also ended up using the smudge tool or blur tool, I think it is, to kind of blur them a little bit better as well. I wouldn't suggest using that too much just because it could make it look a little more plastic looking. And for the nose ring, when I was shading it, I tried making it look like it actually was going into the skin. So I kind of just played with that until I got it to where I liked it. And I'm going to start talking about the background right now just because the video is almost over. But I originally had some watercolor brush sets that I had found and used that I kind of wanted to use for the background. But when I updated Photoshop, I couldn't find them, and I don't think they were on this computer anymore. So I ended up making my own, and it's really simple. All you do is for instance, just took a video of me doing some watercolor splatters on some watercolor paper. I used black watercolor. And then what I did was I took pictures of it, or you could scan it into the computer. And I just brought those into Photoshop and edited them a little bit so that you could see the black a little bit more. And then all you have to do is do the selection of that color. So I used color range, and it's under select color range, and then you select the black, and then it'll select the outline of the watercolor splatter, and then you just do edit and then define brush, and then you can name the brush, and then you have those set and saved. So then if you need some watercolor splatters, there you go. I'll walk you through more of the editing process when that actually shows up, because it will make a little bit more sense. For when I'm shading clothes, I like to make sure I know where the light source is, and kind of you have to think of how the fabric is folding and all that in order to get an accurate portrayal of the shading and where the light should be hitting. So that's why I put up a reference image so that I could tell. And for the hair, I wanted to do like individual hair strands, make it look like it was coming out of my head. But I just am not at that skill level yet. So I just took a brown and kind of did, a subtle single stroke for each hair that I wanted. And then I went in with some lighter white so that it kind of looks like hair, but it's not quite as realistic. And then I added a cyan glow to the earrings just to make them look like the light was shining off of metal. And here's where I'm starting the background process. So I knew I wanted a watercolor splatter, but I couldn't find any that I really liked. So I just kind of played around with this until I decided to actually make my own watercolor splatters. And I think for this original background, it was just too much, so I ended up erasing it. So here's where I'm doing the watercolor splatter. I originally started taping down the paper, but then I realized that it was kind of a waste of time and tape. So I just took some watercolor, did some different splatters, moved it around, and then I took some pictures and brought them into Photoshop. So this is where I'm bringing them in, and what I did was I did Alt Select Color Range and selected the black. And if you notice, it still picks up some of the color of the paper because there are shadows on the paper since I used a camera to take the picture. So what you have to do is I just selected it, and then I used the lasso tool to deselect different areas that I didn't want. And then I used the delete key and deleted until I got most of the background color out of there and had a nice brush. And then again, you just go to edit and then define brush. I think I made about 8 watercolor splatters, and I didn't end up using all of them, but I did use a fair amount. And so now I'm starting on the background, and so what I did was I just used the different ones that I made. I used different colors, different opacities, and then I also ended up adding some more up into the left-hand corner. And then when I was done with the background, I did a Gaussian blur on it just to make it look a little bit more in the distance. And now we're coming up to the end of the video, so I just wanted to say thank you for watching, and I hope to see you all in the next one.